Morning, everybody. Welcome to the News Agenda. Crappy Mondays, I should say first. Welcome to the News Agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's showbiz editor, brackets features, Jessica Bolton. Morning, Jess.
Morning, Susie. Thank you for having me.
Now, if you look at the front of today's paper, you will see a great big splash of what we call sort of above the fold. So at the top of the page there about Vanessa, whose last name suddenly escapes me. What is wrong with me? It's a Monday morning.
It's Vanessa Feltz, Susie.
Vanessa
How can you
Feltz.
forget?
Look, my dog ate rat poison at the weekend. We've been in and out of the vets, and it's been very bad bottom trouble ever since. For all of us. So I'm a bit all over the place this weekend. Vanessa Feltz has got a new book out about her career in the media, and Jessica has been serializing it, and we're on about day 3 now, aren't we, Jess?
We're on day 3. We're on the final day now. She's been telling us some fantastic stuff over the time. She's talked a little bit about her love life, where she broke up with her last ex-fiance of 16 years. She actually found out in the back of a taxi when he confirmed it. She threw herself out of the taxi. And this was the detail.
He confirmed he was cheating on her.
When he confirmed he was cheating on her. And this was the detail I particularly liked. She wanted to get away from him so desperately, she just opened the door, jumped out, and he didn't even stop the taxi, Susie. He didn't stop the taxi. So she stayed. Yes. So, I mean, crikey. Obviously, she's had a life and a half so far. Really interesting stuff. Really talking about being on a diet from the age of 9 that her mum put her on, giving her half a grapefruit for dinner when the rest of the family had a normal traditional dinner. You can see where all, her insecurities and those issues have come from over the years. I've got to say, actually, I've done a lot of these sort of serializations and books over the years. Vanessa obviously wrote this herself, being a former journalist at one time for this paper. And it's a cracking read. It's a cracking read. It was poignant and it was also hilarious in parts. She's a really funny reader. So yeah, it's been good fun. Today's all about a big breakfast and all those stars she had on the bed with her when she took over from Paula Yates and Paul O'Grady, doing those legendary bits, which I think probably you and I remember quite well, don't we, Susie? Because we're probably the right age.
Yeah, I was on my way to primary school at the time. So.
Oh yeah, me too. I was just at nursery, but watched it on repeat. Yeah, but yeah, no, it's cracking stuff. It's a real pack.
Well, if you're interested in that, have a good read of the paper. Jess has done a lot of work on that. Now, this is the People's Paper Review, so get into the comments, ask us your questions. We will do our best to answer them for you. Those of you listening later on podcast will just have to ask yourself if inheriting privilege is really worth the effort anymore. So what have we got for you today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on, speaking of inherited privilege, a calculated political snub to King Charles's planned visit to Australia later this month. Now, more on that a bit later. First, I want to go to page 2, where there is a very calculated political snub to the 92 peers in the House of Lords, who are in the second legislative chamber as a result of one of their ancestors performing military or sexual favours for a previous king. Now, Jess, this week, the House of Commons, the plebs that we just voted in, are going to be having a vote on a bill to remove these 92 from the House of Lords. Can you explain this a bit to us? I mean, why are they still there? It's 2024.
Exactly. And as we were discussing before you go on, by the nature of this and the way the titles pass down, which has always been traditionally father to son, obviously, it's just reserving spaces for men in this second chamber who are going to be ultimately they are the last sort of stage of a law being passed. So you've got these 92 men in there who have inherited the privilege of being there, and let's not forget it comes with a pretty hefty nice sum that you get.
300 a day.
Yeah,
only in a sitting, so it's about 6 months of the year, I suppose. Yeah. But still 300 a day.
Even so, it's better than what a lot of us get per day for sitting around listening to people. But it's so you've got those people there, 92 people there who have done nothing of their own merit to be there, but they've inherited this from years before. And you've got to ask a question of like, why are we going with this system still? However, the counter argument being, what do we do if we don't have that. I mean, this is only a step towards not having a second chamber at all. I mean, they've got a long way to go before you're talking about that. But when you do get to that stage and you're talking about, would it be more of a sort of, are we going down the presidential route and all of that? There's a lot of arguments that you want to do that. But I think with the hereditary peers, it kind of seems like a no-brainer in 2024 that men should be handed a title to rule on laws affecting the country just because of their great-great-grandfathers, like you say, sometimes dodgy favours to the king of old.
Yeah, exactly. And I think we're looking at some footage now. I think those are High Court judges going into the Lords' Chamber, the Law Lords. And it used to be that the House of Lords was your final court of appeal. And you could take a case to be heard by the Law Lords and have it accepted or not if it got turned down at previous courts. Now we have the Supreme Court, of course. We don't need the Law Lords in quite the same way, although the guys at the Supreme Court are generally the same. It's the Law Lords. What do you think, everybody? Where do you stand on the issue of these 92 hereditary peers? Are they serving a function? Maybe that, you can, even if you're there by an accident of birth, you can have some who are really useful. You can have quite a lot, of course, who aren't bothering to turn up, who aren't costing the state anything. They only go for the state opening Parliament and getting to dress up and see the king. They're not there the rest of the time sticking their nose into laws because maybe they feel they shouldn't, but they do have this sort of hereditary right still. Is there a benefit to that? So this is carrying on really the work that Tony Blair began in 1999 when he removed, and I remember a massive furore about this at the time because I was old enough to remember it, Jess, that he took out 667 hereditary peers. He just cleared them all out, but he left these 92 behind as a bit of a compromise. Now, they've got a strange system where if one of them dies, they get to vote for another one to bring in. So there's kind of
from the existing ones
from the existing type of hereditary peers. So it's a strange sort of democratic system where you can vote, but only for a very small number of people who are just like you.
Little bit like the last Tory leadership that decided our Prime Minister.
Exactly. So it's just like picking a Tory leader, fundamentally. Steve says the Lords should be replaced with an elected upper house. Now, it's worth pointing out to all those who might think, and it has been said elsewhere, that taking these 92 out is an attack on tradition. Now, as Jess said, that means reserving those 100 seats not only for people who have zero qualification or assessment of their skills and abilities or their usefulness, no checks whatsoever whether any point to them being there, but who are pretty much all men. And the rules on primogeniture have only very recently changed. So generally speaking, that it's going to be all men and it's going to be inherited by men when they die, and they're going to be voting for other men because that's what everybody does. You vote for the other men. Last time I looked, Jess, I couldn't see any institution in the country where you are legally allowed to preserve seats on the board for men. Can you think of any?
I can't think of any. Oh, I might be mistaken. There's probably a few boards of golf clubs around, Susie. That's probably where we'll find them.
But we've just had the Garrick Club, haven't we? That was had to comply with the law. You can't ban men. You can't ban women, right?
You can't ban women. You can't ban women. If we did ban men, it might be better. But there we are. That's an aside. Don't put complaints in. That was a joke. But. It's I mean, like you said, with the rules of primogeniture, it's going to be at least like 20, 30 years before you start seeing any women come through on that basis, because it was only a few years ago when it changed around the time of Charlotte, wasn't it, being born? Princess Charlotte. Yeah. So, we're talking quite a long way off before, that comes to fore. I mean, we're not saying, these 92, they might be the most amazing lords in there. They might be fantastic. But I do think this point here on the fact that they should be voted for by the public, not on birthright. If they are fantastic, they'll be voted back. I think it should be some kind of public say at this point, at this stage. It's, we're in the 21st century, it's 2024. Do we really need to be overseen by people who have done something in the 1700s and their offspring? We talk about Nepo babies or Nepo babies, however you want to say it. Well, the House of Lords has had them for donkey's years.
700 years. Some of them says this Council of Parliament got instituted. So Steve agrees with you. He says Lords should be there on merit, which is recognised and voted for by the public, not on birthright or the Prime Minister appointing their mates. This is one of the arguments that people are going to have against it, to some extent, is that if you remove these 92 hereditaries, whose I suppose they might argue that their role is to maintain British traditions and standard, whatever, you're going to free up basically 92 places for people who are appointed, not for doing a monarch a financial, sexual, or other kind of military favour, but for doing exactly that, maybe for a prime minister. And we've all can think of people that have been appointed by a prime minister, and we've had quite a few in recent history. They appoint them at birthday times, the monarch's birthday. They appoint them when they dissolve Parliament. They appoint them when they start Parliament. They appoint them when they resign. They all have a right to do it. Even opposition leaders have a right to appoint some who are, by definition, perhaps failed at being politicians because they're not maybe making much difference. And they're going to have more of those perhaps as a result, but they've got more than 800 peers in there at the moment. They do need to thin the numbers out quite a bit. This is taking 100 out in one fell swoop. So that might be a bit more useful. But Jess, is there a better way? The prime ministers have abused the ability to appoint peers since the days of Lloyd George, at least, if not previously, I think. Is there any better way than letting a prime minister decide who gets to decide on his laws? Or is that strangely necessary for the smooth running of government? People can't be trusted to elect the best people all the time. People buy Coldplay records, Jess.
Exactly. There needs to be some kind of test before you're allowed to vote on these kind of things. This is what we ended up in the current mess that we're currently in, depending on which side of the Brexit debate you were on. But, public votes don't traditionally always go the way that some people would like them to go. So, yes, it is a danger. And previously, I'd come down on the other side of this argument that actually you need to have that fail-safe of having people there who are not in any way connected to to political parties, to somebody's alliance. Obviously Boris Johnson, he sort of there was the controversy about the 29-year-old that he made a lady in his exit honours, and
how young men who like that at the same time didn't get anywhere near the attention that she did, I should say.
No,
young men.
I'm sure there was a lot of. Unfortunately, she was the one that stuck out, and I do feel that's a little bit because she was a woman as well, and I think that's probably a little bit unfair. But as an example, I think we can all agree somebody who's that age is very unlikely to have the life experience that you'd want. Now, what is the better way of doing it? And to be honest, you can see why this is a difficult decision, because, like you say, if it goes open to a full public vote. And what are we going to do? Vote for however 100 members that we want in there? Is it going to be done on a constituency basis again? Is it going to be like that? So we end up with a sort of two-house kind of sort of system like the states do, and they're sort of voting in on different times. And we've got people campaigning to be in there. You're going to have that. Or you're going to have people just voting for, we can't vote for hundreds of people unless you do break it up like that. So does it become the thing is, you want a sort of pool of people that we know are experienced, and then the public could pick from them. But will we ever get that? Because everything becomes very political at that point, where people are putting forward people and they're campaigning, etc. So it does get very, very difficult. But at the same time, I just feel it is so wrong that you can be handed such privilege at this point to decide stuff, because it is important when the laws have to go through the House of Lords. Mm-hmm. So there have been things that have been kicked back for years that we really would, we could have had passed from a long time ago. And you've got.
You mentioned Brexit, and one of the things that the Lords did then was it was a check on government. It was a restraint. It depending how you look at it, of course, on Brexit. But sometimes it does go, can you think again about this? you have to think again about it. It's not quite right. And of course, the Commons does have primacy. So if the Lords disagrees, it becomes law anyway. It's just a case of kind of marking territory. And John says, didn't Gordon Brown and Labour promise big reform in the Lords? As we've just said, Labour did do the big reform in 1999. Gordon Brown did want to do some more, but he was only Prime Minister for 3 years. Then he got chucked out, and then we had 14 years of the other lot who didn't do anything for a variety of reasons, probably because they quite liked it exactly the way it was. And Conservatives, by their very nature, don't want things to change. That's what the word Conservative means. So it stayed as it was, and now this was in the Labour manifesto, and they're acting on it within, the first few months. So that's not bad going, I would suggest. Perhaps overall, the solution would be to have a proportion of the Lords that are appointed by a Prime Minister, a share that is appointed by public vote, maybe. I think probably the thing to do would be to have people that are nominated, maybe, and you can be able to sort of express some approval for them. Or you can have, like you have in the States, a Congress and Senate system where you have, a local peer who's your Lord What's-it you can go to if you've got a problem that your MP is not dealing with or something. But I think you've got to have a set proportion of numbers. That's the thing at the moment, isn't it? That the House has just grown out of control. And there should be a set proportion of crossbenchers. I really do think that you should have half this party, a third this lot, a third the other lot, and a third crossbenchers.
Yeah.
That doesn't really change. If you have 10-year election cycles or whatever it might be, I think you have to keep the proportions the same, no matter what the result of a general election in the House of Commons. You've got to have all sides there for the national debate, perhaps.
I do agree, yeah.
The population. And you should be able to have, just to have people in there that actually meet the requirements of the population, the demographics. So the right proportion of people of colour, the right proportion of Scots and Welsh, the right proportion of men and women, and everything else.
And people with experience in certain areas. Like you see great people who have done, like, we've got our Pride of Britain Awards upcoming, the Daily Mirror Pride of Britain Awards with TSB, I believe. Upcoming. These are kind of people that are experts in what they do. They have done amazing things. When we talk about sort of public elections, those are the kind of people I think I would like to see put into the House of Lords. Somebody that's worked for a charity for 30 odd years and really knows about, say, for example, issues on domestic violence or something. I do feel like a public vote element of the House of Lords, like you said, not all of it, could give some really interesting results in terms of the kind of characters and more sort of rounded people that are to represent normal people. I mean, somebody who's had it handed down does not represent
exactly people like Floella Benjamin and Doreen Lawrence. I would suggest are graces and ornaments to the House of Lords. Someone else. Jeffrey Archer is not. Richard says something powerful about people who can spare time to pore over proposed legislation. Whether they do that entirely altruistically is probably unreasonable to assume in all ways. But, the fact is that it does need to have someone go over those and do those checks. Right, we need to move on because we've been spent 20 minutes on that. So get into the questions. Let us know, what do you feel about the removal of the final hereditary peers from the House of Lords? Now on to the main story of the day. And our main figure of inherited privilege is due to visit his mother's former dominions this month for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. And so King Charles is taking a break from his cancer treatment to head down under and have public engagements on a state visit to Australia. But not everyone's delighted about it. And despite the fact he said publicly last week that he wouldn't stand in the way of any vote for independence, and that's up to Australians to decide, some people are taking a bit of a stand, aren't they, Jess?
They are indeed. I think all the state leaders are saying they are not going to the opening sort of event for him, the welcoming sort of banquet event thing for King Charles, which, as our columnist there, our royal columnist said, is frankly seen by some as very disrespectful. Even if you do think that changes should be made, is it right to do that right now? It does feel very harsh for King Charles. I think perhaps because we know what he's going through. He is putting his treatment on hold to do this because he wants to go down there and make his first visit down there and as king, and put to try and make it feel more part of the Commonwealth, because of this sort of talk about this. But it does feel like it's is it really the right time for for the sort of Republic talk from Australia? And is this really, did they really have to do the snub right now? When he's obviously when he is still undergoing serious treatment. However, on the flip side, it is their country and they do have a right to decide what they want to do and whether they still want to be ruled by somebody who's technically thousands of miles away.
But not just technically, literally.
Well, literally.
Planet. Teresa says, abolish the monarchy. It's a waste of space and money. We deserve a better republic. Lots of people on Twitter saying something similar. On the topic of hereditary peers, Jeff Milner, a former sub from the Sunday Mirror, hello Jeff, says he agrees about hereditary peers and the way prime ministers appoint them is ridiculous. Shockingly, there's 804 lords, more than the MPs. There's only 650 of them. They on a scandalous salary and pensions, while pension age for the hoi polloi is getting pushed up. Quite right, Jeff. Keith says, going on holiday when it's wet and cold in the UK, we're not fools. They're not going third class, are they? No, he is getting to skip to Australia during our winter, which is nice enough. And if I was having cancer treatment, I think I might try and squeeze one of those in as well. But so these are the people who are objecting are the premiers of the individual states that make up Australia. Most of them are from the centre-left Labour Party. One of them is from the centre-right Liberal Party, which is equivalent to our Conservatives, just about. And they all say they have, not that they don't want to go, but they've just got somewhere else to be. They've got a board meeting. They're getting their hair done. They've got to pick their nose. Some limp, lame excuse. They go, oh, sorry, we're not going to make it. And 5 minutes before he turns up, when it's been planned for months. And what I don't really understand, Jess, is why they're doing it, though, because as Russell Myers, our royal correspondent, points out in the piece there, the support for the royal family in Oz is pretty high for Australia. There's no big push for independence at the moment. It's not like, in the post-Diana years when they're a bit more agitating about these things. There's no political point to be gained by this. So why are the politicians doing it?
Are they doing it just for their own sort of political side? Because there might be some sort of, people will think, well, they are taking action, they're doing this. It's an age-old argument. We shouldn't be ruled by, UK. We shouldn't have that. It's an easy score for the people who are disgruntled. Like, again, it's very similar to the sort of Brexit situation. It's very easy to be anti-establishment and to gain followers through that. If you think back to when, like, sort of how easily Farage managed to whip people up into an anti-establishment about the EU, not wanting to be part of that. If it's the politicians down there, it's it's quite an easy thing to get people on side to go, yes, you've put two fingers up to the establishment. I mean, that's always been the side that people have done. Is it something to do with that? Is it legitimately that they had a nail appointment down to get their nails done and they couldn't move it? It could well be that, Susie. I mean, we mustn't be unfair. There's probably very long queue for them now.
No one wants to meet the king if you've got bad nails. It's got to be said.
Exactly. Sometimes, maybe they've got to stay in and binge watch something on Netflix. Yeah. People do have busy lives, Susie. Meeting the king isn't always a priority.
I don't know what state premiers do in Australia, but I think they probably have 5 minutes to spare.
I know.
John says, I don't want to end up with President Nigel Farage, which is ugly. Do talk about president person I don't like, which is what happened if you don't have the monarchy. And I think it's worth pointing out, Charles isn't there to reinstate colonial rule. He's not going to reinvade. He's not bringing back slavery. He's there to promote good causes. So he's doing stuff like visiting community projects, talking about the environment, which is a big issue, of course, in Oz, raising awareness of domestic abuse. It's something the Queen has taken on, as well as sort of recognising, handing out a few honours to prominent Australians who've had outstanding achievements in the world of health, arts, culture and sports. So, I mean, that's all sort of the stuff that we have accepted the royals can do, and if they keep doing that and keeping their nose out of politics, they can hang around. That's the kind of the deal we've arrived at in the UK. Why can't Australia see it the same way, do you think, Jess? I mean, Steve says elect a new king or queen by raffle each year, and that way we're all in with a chance. Do you think, what's Australia's problem? Have they got sort of a historical animus maybe against the people who sent them out in the first place?
Well, I think they probably have. I mean, we all know the history of what happened there. I mean, obviously you've got the sort of the people, the native Australians who were actually there before we actually started shipping a load of people over for stealing a loaf of bread and getting deported. I mean, to be honest, when you look at that,
this is my forebears.
Yeah.
Got
is it?
Yeah.
Transported over.
Family of recidivists, I'm afraid.
Oh, lovely. So, I mean, to be honest, when you look back now, you probably got the better end of the deal. You get to go and live in Australia in the sunshine. You've got neighbours. I mean, it looks delightful. But no, I mean, obviously, I think there probably is that kind of sort of like, why would you want to be? It's a huge country. Why would you want to have anyone overseeing you technically who is from a small island, however 1,000 miles away? Why would you would feel like, well, this is ridiculous. Yet at the same time, I think what King Charles is going there to do is some great causes. I mean, it's very fitting with that. I remember the wildfires, like just pre-pandemic, I think early 2020, where that ravaged Australia. The environmental issues there are huge, and I mean, it's his baby issue that he likes to promote. And I think why wouldn't they welcome him? I mean, he's not there doing something, like you say, antagonistic. He's not there going in saying, right, all these people need to be doing this or that. The royal family, as by nature, are just pretty much promoting good causes on behalf of charities now.
Yeah, I suppose the issue is that for your average Australian, day in, day out, you're talking about your politicians and your congressmen and your senators and your state premiers and your prime minister, and these are the people who make decisions that affect your day-to-day life. And then this old bloke and his missus just sort of pop in and go, gosh, isn't the environment a terrible mess? And then buggers off again. Well, how is that helpful? How is it relevant? It's not changing anything. Are we actually paying for you? What? How's this working? I can understand how it feels very anachronistic from the average Australian's point of view. But like I say, there's not a big thirst for removing him at present. Yeah. There probably would have been about 30 years ago, but not anymore. So I think they're just going to sort of let it slide. And they generally all say, don't they, the former Commonwealth countries, well, we'll wait until this monarch dies, and then that's probably the right time. And then nothing changes, nothing happens. A few people sort of said that when the Queen was alive. And I think there's been a few movements in the Caribbean, some of the Caribbean Commonwealth countries, but they're not getting anywhere very fast.
I mean, there's been the odd one. There was the one that did declare independence recently over in Caribbean. But like at the same time, from my point of view, and maybe this is a very naive, privileged point of view, but you kind of think, well, what harm are they doing at this particular point? Yes, they cost us money, but the argument is that they cost us less than what they bring into the economy. That's always been the old argument.
Yeah,
whether that is still true, I don't know. I mean, maybe that was...
It's a lot of tourists, and they chopped their heads off their royals and didn't bring them back afterwards.
Exactly. And they've lost that tourist money through short-sighted guillotining back in the...
They could have had even more if Versailles was shut off to the public and they were still living in there eating their cake. I don't think they would, Jess.
I don't think they would.
No, I think if we had no monarch, we could open up Highgrove and Sandringham and Buckingham Palace even more than they already are to the public.
Exactly. I mean, they've opened up a lot of it, to be quite honest. I mean,
I'm sure he's opening up some of Balmoral as well, isn't he? So that's new.
I mean, in January, I remember when I was younger, and you'd go and see the Queen when she came in, and it's really exciting, and it's a lovely thing to have. You don't have that in some countries. Once it's gone, it's gone. So I actually feel a lot more strongly about the House of Lords and the sort of inherited, the privilege there than I do about the very core royal family. They've slimmed it right down, haven't they? We're not seeing so-and-so's cousin doing stuff on the taxpayer dime anymore.
No, and Harry and Meghan, of course, have gone. I mean, I think there was some talk about them maybe moving to Australia and being sort of royals in residence, and that didn't work out, which maybe is an argument for actually having someone knocking around if you want to keep the Commonwealth countries going on. That's why they have these visits and so on, state visits, to try and keep people on side. But, if they can only pop in and pop out again, then I don't know what difference it's going to make. Anyway, perhaps they're being rude, or perhaps they're just Australian. Who knows? Who cares? They're another side of the world, apart from Jess in France. They can't be bothered with fake bowing and scraping and pretending they like them. I mean, fair, they're just being honest. I don't really have a problem with that. Anyway, what do you think, everybody? Do you think they should be a little bit better to King Charles? Do you think they're being quite reasonable? How do you feel about it? Get into the comments and let us know. We'll have a little wrap up at the end if there's anyone in there. But first off, we have managed to find some good news for you. Here it is. Now, the Mirror has reported on several years on the plight of Billy Caldwell, who had untreatable epilepsy and was denied the cannabis medication needed to control the up to 300 life-threatening seizures he had every day. Now, his mother had a supply confiscated from her at the airport, so you may be aware of the fact she's been campaigning to get it sort of made available on the NHS. She eventually did win a prescription for him, and now the government has announced something the Tories didn't through all the long years of campaigning: full-scale medical trials. Now, as one mum in that story points out, that means that patients will know their medicine is manufactured to a certain standard. Right, it's the same standard every month, and it's always going to be available. Added to which, they're spending up to about £1,000 a month on treatments, which just isn't bearable for anybody, really. But you can't have medicine where the one you get next month is slightly different to the one you had this month. You don't know if it's going to be there. And epilepsy, which is something I suffer from as well, can just switch you off whenever it wants to. So you really do need the medication, the treatment to make it work. If nothing else is working, then medical cannabis is the way to go. Now, this isn't the kind of cannabis that gets you high. It has that bit removed, and it just sort of emphasizes the compound which does help. And that's extracted and magnified just as it is with lots of other medicines that are based on plants that have good things in them that help us out. Jess, is this proof that if you stop and think about the benefits that something brings, whether it's the royal family, whether it's the House of Lords, maybe there is a way to overcome the risks and the dangers?
I love the way you tied that all together, Susie. It was such a beautiful way of tying it all together, because it is true. It is true. I think in this case, it's John Stelzer says here, I seem to smell cannabis everywhere I go. I thought it had already been legalized.
That's why you can smell it everywhere, John. You're busy smoking it, clearly.
I mean, I think on this case, it's the same as if you got any number of drugs, like you rightly say, that have had extracts come from various different plants and things like that. We're not talking about the bit that makes that bit that makes you high, that is extracted, as you say, and the fact that we haven't been exploring these kind of medications sooner just seems criminal, really, because of all the people it could have helped. This is no different than taking a bit of rose oil for using in something that you're doing. Why is it any different if you're not taking the bit?
Well, I'll tell you what's no different to is it's no different to the morphine extracted from heroin and opium poppies,
exactly,
which you get as painkillers whenever you go to hospital for something, which I had frigging back full of when I gave birth and was very grateful for. I was high as a kite, but I wasn't in any pain, which was the important bit. And if it is the same thing, it's the same theory with medical cannabis. The fact is that people with epilepsy, even though that is 1 in 10 of us will have a seizure at some point in our lives, and 1 in 100 will go on to develop epilepsy, we just do not treat epileptics like an epilepsy like it's something important that we need to really spend some money and some time and some effort on. So well done, the government, for doing something right. Hooray!
Right. And it's worth saying that it's not just with epilepsy that the medical cannabis will be, incredibly useful to have on the NHS. It did say that some families are paying up to £2,000 a month, even sometimes, because when you get this situation when it's only available privately, they can charge what they like. Yeah, and then we're in a situation like States, people
with chronic pain conditions as well that they find
chronic pain, and there isn't anything, my mum has chronic pain, and like there isn't anything available on there's the same old things that you have. There's a lot of things, but there's the same old things. But there's a massive problem with actually being able to, so many people suffering and can't seem to get enough help or enough people listen, because there's certain illnesses that don't get as much attention as others, as we always had known. So why not explore every avenue possible? And we've long known the benefits of medical cannabis, and personally I don't see it as any different, as like you say, from any other plants that you could potentially get. But and as you say, yeah,
it's those things as well. I think perhaps that, as what John was saying there, there's a lot of people using it. Well, maybe it will stop a lot of people self-medicating with illegal drugs, which have other harmful aspects to them. And just if they're able to get a prescription and it's completely harmless, that will actually reduce the amount of people that are smoking cannabis in the street and giving money to drug gangs and other really bad things.
Well, that's a big argument, isn't it? It's like taking the money out of the illegal illegal gangs of doing it. But like you say, standing back and looking at the positive sides of things can sometimes be a very good thing. And I do think, there's, what has King Charles done? He is doing, I mean, did they want him to go on I'm a Celebrity? What did they want him to do when he's down there in Oz? I mean, it's
clean, Rooney. They're not having anybody else.
To be honest, it's the right sort of time of year. Has anyone actually put the call into ITV to check that he's not doing a quick flit in the jungle?
There you go, Jess. There's your next quick call up and find out what's going on. Is he happening to go anywhere near Ant and Dec? We'll find out, won't we? Right, we've got to stop now because we've overrun. Thank you, Jess, for your time this morning. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. Thank you, Australia, for being Australia. We will see you all again on Wednesday for another edition of the News Agenda. Till then, everybody, take care, stay safe. Tatty bye.